Wubba lubba dub dub, everybody! The squid is back, the anti-reviews is back, and I'm here again to defend a piece of media that I really loved, the Rick and Morty anime. And I've gone through this video, I've listened to it all, and it was terrible. This is one of the worst videos I've seen talking about stuff that is like by a guy who is so far up his own ass, but he's not like outrageously retarded like the critical drinker, but this guy is just like he waffles so much, he speaks so much and he says so little, and he just shits on everything, and it's a big problem. And here is me reacting to Mother's Basement. It's long and painful, but I think the payoff is worth it, you know, when I really rip into him, you know. So get hyped for me reacting to Mother's Basement, the Rick and Morty anime, and then afterwards I'm reacting to someone who's slightly better at at talking about this anime. So here we are hearing about the Rick and Morty anime, and there's gonna be spoilers in the last half an hour, I guess. But before then, anything you should be able to watch without too much general spoilers, I guess. Yeah, you should be. So go ahead, and then maybe before the last half an hour you can decide if you're gonna watch the anime before you finish the video. As if anyone ever does that. Alright, take that, Mother's Basement, you piece of shit. Here is me having to suffer through you for probably an hour. Rick and Morty. Have you guys heard that Rick and Morty had an anime? You may not have heard because it really does not get talked about much. But there are a few people who complained how it was terrible. And, well, I thought it was alright, so let's hear what they have to say. I mean, surely they're not all gonna be crazy. Look at these unflattering images. Could you imagine? Actually, they're flattering enough because, like, the anime is actually that ugly, but you know what? It's okay. Something can be ugly and still be good.
Sponsored by Capcom. Lately, Rick and Morty, the adaptations of Western IP that seem to be so in vogue lately. Rick and Morty, the anime, might just be the one I was looking forward to the most. Emphasis on was. When Adult Swim started dropping those first experimental anime shorts a few years ago, they vastly expanded my view of what this raunchy sci-fi sitcom could be. Not unlike what Star Wars Visions did, and not unlike Star Wars Visions, the prospect of one of their directors expanding those ideas into a full series seemed pretty damn promising.
This guy has very long sentences, which makes this kind of hard for me to have a back and forth. Okay, so we started off with there being Western animes. What was that? Is this The Witcher? I didn't know there was a Witcher anime. What is that? Does that count the Lord of the Rings thing too? Was that an anime or was that a Western animation?
So in vogue lately.
Was that a Witcher or not? It must be a Witcher, right? He had the weird eyes. Okay. And then he said he was actually looking forward to it. That's good. So we were on the same page then. And then did he say he liked this stuff? I guess this is where we were. So I just felt like I had to interject something, but I'll let him speak for longer now, right? So Let's see what he has to say otherwise. And I guess he brought this Star Wars stuff up, which I haven't actually seen, and I want to see it now. So I guess I want to know if this is a positive or a negative example here.
Star Wars Visions, the prospect of one of their directors expanding those ideas into a full series seemed pretty damn promising.
Oh, so I guess it was not a full series, this Star Wars Visions? Okay, too bad. Would have loved that.
At the time, artistically and commercially. I mean, I don't know if I'd have picked Takashi Sano to do it. Personally, I preferred the great yokai battle of Akihabara and Shogun and Samurai to either of his shorts, but Rick and Morty vs. Genocider did get a very respectable 10 million views, so I can certainly see why Cartoon Network's execs saw potential there. But then his next short, Summer Meets God, only got 2 million views just a year later, and a year after that, Shogun and Samurai Part 2 couldn't even crack 400K. Also, the cartoon fell off so hard in Japan they stopped dubbing it altogether after season 4, so I also see...
What does that even mean? the cartoon fell off. I mean, Rick and Morty did not fall off. Did it fall off in Japan? And then why would that mean they've stopped dubbing it? I mean, I know they make these in Japanese and then they would dub them to English, so they would still have to dub them. That doesn't even make sense.
Why maybe some of those same executives, or possibly their replacements from the Warner Bros. Discovery merger, might have started to get cold feet on the whole thing and maybe scale the budget back a bit to the point they couldn't even afford the main series B-list celebrity voice cast anymore.
Hey everybody, guess who just got done baking a space Mary cake?
Or maybe
I kind of thought that Jerry kind of fit, okay? I mean, I know he's not the real one, but I thought the voices were okay, even if they weren't the real ones. And I mean, like, I guess the floodgates are open anyways, considering that we lost the Rick and the Morty voice actor in one go, so I guess it's all new voices now on here, on the anime.
Jason DeMarco isn't being forced to cover for the Zaslav regime. That dub really was an intentional choice to differentiate the anime from the originals, like they keep saying in interviews, and the plan all along was to do the big action set pieces as these erratic, janky slideshows that people keep making fun of on Twitter as a viral marketing strategy or something. Who's to say? Either scenario is equally plausible. But regardless of the reason, what we've ended up with is a show that doesn't sound like Rick and Morty, isn't funny like Rick and Morty, does actually look like Rick and Morty, kind of, in an uncanny acquired taste sort of way that would really benefit from a higher frame count, and has left just about everyone who's watched it.
The frame count is like the least of my concerns. I mean, like it. Like, the lines are weird, the teeth are very weird. The frames I thought were perfectly fine. Yeah, but yeah, it's not the best looking anime for sure. It's probably the worst looking anime, in fact.
It confused, disappointed, and generally baffled as to what the hell they were even thinking. Well, that's exactly what I made this video and watched every episode that's out so far twice in English and Japanese to figure out, which cost me $40 whole on iTunes, by the way, because it's not streaming in Japan or Canada at all. But first, I'm thrilled to tell you that event
fucking sponsorship
and is over dimension qualities. We first need to figure out what that story even is, which is way harder than you.
I really hope that he went through the whole story, because like if he didn't go to the final episode, then this review would be pointless and stupid, but let's see.
You might expect, because on top of jumping all over dimensions like Rick and Morty normally do, their anime counterparts are also jumping all over time, Memento style.
Don't someone mess with time! No, with time! I will mess with time! I will mess with time.
Yeah, I didn't watch this thing twice for my own health. The show has multiple non-linear plot lines crisscrossing and folding in on each other in ways that almost demand a second viewing just to make basic sense of it all, which is a pretty darn big ask from a
Yeah, actually, I probably should watch it again, but I haven't gotten to it yet. So maybe in a few years I'll watch it again, and then I'll have a much better idea of what I saw. But I think I got a good enough grasp of it. I mean, not enough to write a video essay on it, but you know, I think I got the main gist of it. But yeah, I mean, you would probably get that just from seeing it normally anyways.
Show most people don't even enjoy watching the first time, and so I've taken the liberty of laying the timeline out into something a little more comprehensible so you don't have to. The first episode cold opens on a Federation battle cruiser hovering above a planet full of absurdly generic aliens who are apparently pacifists.
Absurdly generic aliens? Okay, come on, man. Rick and Morty has absurdly generic aliens all the time. I mean, unless they're like made of dicks, I guess. But even then, they have like, I mean, like they have aliens that are based on like a single idea sometimes, you know, like, yeah. Like you gotta have like the point of them being generic is like the point is the Federation is gonna murder them, and they're the most peaceful the most peaceful race there can be. So it's just a stupid way of establishing that the Federation is this horrible, alright?
Meaning the whole planet's just gonna do nothing but wait to get blowed up by a big scary space laser. Lucky for them, sexy Twin Tails midriff tattoo Summer Smith is here to make for them.
Midriff tattoo.
Sexy
I gotta see this. Oh, wait, is that? There's no tattoo on the midriff?
Wait to get blowed up by a
Was I misled?
big scary space laser. Lucky for them, sexy Twin Tails midriff tattoo Summer Smith is here to make me deeply uncomfortable with that.
Oh yeah, there
head
it
on
is. I guess. Wow, that hard. I thought that might have just been like a drawing or whatever, like her face. Like, surely those lines on her face aren't like permanent either, right? I guess it's just a war paint, but I thought.
That body, and also hack the bad guy's spaceship after she's done eavesdropping on these two bug alien fascists' gay relationship drama. The one guy thinks his boyfriend's cheating on him with quote-unquote some hussy who had the keys to his room, while the boyfriend insists she just picked him up and he's just being paranoid. And normally I wouldn't fixate on something this trivial, but somehow that's the most coherent running subplot in the entire anime so far. As for uncomfortably sexy...
What do you mean so far? You got like a minute into this anime, come on.
Space Summer, I assume we'll get back to her at some point eventually, but that point has yet to arrive as of episode 4, and this scene doesn't really seem to have anything to do with anything that happens in the entire rest of the episode it's in. Though, I suspect it might be close to the end point of the Mullet Rick timeline, which will make sense to you in a sec. After the credits, which, credit where it's due, is a pretty fucking awesome little sequence with a bangin' theme song and easily the best animation in the whole show, we cold open a second time on the Federation SWAT team as it...
Wait, I gotta check if he's seen the whole thing at this point, because otherwise this be a big waste of time. But yeah, don't worry, we're right on track. This is just gonna take a second.
raids the...
Alright, so he does have watched the whole anime, that's good. But he is so hard to follow. He talks so much ramble. This is gonna be a tough video, but we'll make it through, okay? We'll do our best. We gotta defend Rick and Morty the anime. I'm the lone defender, the only person who liked it, okay? And we're gonna be here for Rick and Morty once again.
Smith C-131 home to capture good old Rick C-137, while Jerry absolutely bombs with a comedy routine about repeatedly clogging the toilet. According to the wiki, Rick just got back from his little adventure tryst with the anime crows and also the destruction of the entire Citadel at the end of season 5, meaning that portal guns don't work right now, even though later in episode 2 a bunch of space rebels attack the Federation through what are clearly portal gun portals, but we've barely even started with the time travel bullshit yet, and if I try to fit this into the cartoon continuity on top of all that, my head might actually explode.
Okay, I didn't even realize that thing about the portals not working being because of that, but that's good to know. I thought like, oh yeah. I guess it made sense that portals wouldn't work, because that's convenient for the anime. You don't want portals all the time, you know? But then it's actually smart that they folded it into that specific timeline. That's cool.
Speaking of exploding, that's exactly what the Rick Hollow dummy that the Federation just captured is rigged to do, while the real one is busy chilling in his underwear in this random rainbow wormhole pocket dimension for some reason that possibly has to do with this entropy reversing doohickey that makes stuff go back in time, which the Federation thinks is a bomb he invented, but actually it's just a thing he picked up somewhere. To keep Morty
well, the idea, I guess, is that it's kind of worse than a bomb, you know, because, like, if you reverse time, you erase time, you know, but, I mean, they get into that in the final episode, but yeah, it's very interesting that he's meddling with this crazy technology, which he normally doesn't like doing the time travel altogether, so that makes sense. That would be one of the reasons, and I think this anime actually handles it kind of well, the fact that he does do a time travel plot, and that means that you gotta have all this crazy stuff happening, and then there's a lot of really high stakes stuff happening in the anime, and normally Rick and Morty would not really care about that kind of stuff. That's why Rick doesn't do time travel. So I think this is a good contrast to the actual show.
Distracted while all that's going on, Rick built him a cool laser space samurai VR game thing, but while he's playing that, Mortys from other dimensions start showing up in the simulation somehow, and we follow 4 different ones of them in parallel storylines, some of which also involve like time travel, like that wasn't confusing enough already, as he's saved from a big scary monster by, respectively, a cute girl with perpetually windswept anime hair who wants to make out with him, a guy named Frank and Power Armor, who also wants to make out with him, nobody, that Morty just gets eaten, and a Rick with perpetually windswept anime hair from a dimension where Morty's already dead.
Never thought I'd actually see you again.
Why would he think that? There are
Yeah, that is weird. I do love Mullet Rick, though. That's a cool hairstyle, even though I don't have a mullet anymore. You know, I still like to see it occasionally.
infinite replacement Mortys out there. That's like the whole premise of Rick and Morty. After the whole monster thing goes down, the game just sort of randomly turns into Roy, and all the Mortys start living out different simulated lives simultaneously. The one who was saved by Frank goes to the sauna with him, and they have kind of a
Yeah, it was actually pretty confusing to have realized that there were like several Mortys that were doing this. See, I guess I didn't realize that they were actually existent in the same timelines. I thought they were different possibilities, or like it could be any reason for them existing. But I guess if he says they're from different dimensions, that makes a lot of sense. I like how there's quite a lot to this anime, like logically. So I really enjoyed it, and I think I'll enjoy watching it again one day. I sure hope I remember where I had it on Amazon Prime, because it's pretty hard to find a dub of this anywhere. I don't know why they wouldn't make the dub more easily available, but okay. Damn, these anime pirates, they don't release the English version enough.
Moment where he's like, nah, I think you'd look better without that power armor. And then later, when he's in a loveless trailer park marriage, Frank shows up again and he's like, hey, Morty, I don't have the armor anymore. Then the one who met the anime girl somehow becomes Charles Foster Kane and dies while saying her name instead of Rosebud. It's L, by the way. And then another Morty, who also remembers making out with her, I guess, bumps into her at a lake, but then right before they can make out again, he gets yoinked out of the simulation by Summer, which she's got to do because the wormhole that Rick's in just started collapsing, and now it's filling up with other Ricks from other dimensions that make him impossible to track, and Morty doesn't actually help with that in any way, or even get...
Okay, well, what you missed there is that Rick told Summer that she needs to pull Morty out of the VR game, because otherwise his brain will melt, okay? Like, he forgot to tell Morty and Summer about that little fact until then, so that's why he told her. So that was a nice Rick move.
Any screen time in the next episode besides a single brief cutaway to him crying. And the third episode's whole story is about him going back into the game world for his anime girlfriend again, only to be yoinked out by Summer again and told that now they've got to go save Grandpa again, which isn't actually like a plot hole. It's just very weirdly redundant. Like, why yoink him out at all if he's not going to do
like I just said,
literally anything in the real world between dives? They could have just left him in there. In the middle of the second dive, he runs into Mullet Rick again, who explains the backstory that led up to the death of his Morty, henceforth referred to as Space Morty. See, it turns out he became a famous space resistance hero, wanted across the galaxy by the Federation, kind of like Space Beth from the cartoon, except I don't think there's a clone Morty back on his Earth, and also everyone just calls him Space Morty, including people from space, which is it's a Japanese dub. You know, don't think too much about it.
I mean, it's funny and it's cool. Really, do not think about that part. Okay, it's a cool name, and like it makes sense. Like you might call someone like space something if he goes all over space. I mean, people who are just in space, they wouldn't be called SpaceX. But you know, if their job is to go all over space doing stuff, then they might be called SpaceX, but no affiliation to Elon Musk's bullshit scam.
That. Also, instead of doing the rebel thing as a lone badass, Space Morty teams up with Elle, who's actually an alien, the last of her kind, from a species that can remember the future, but can't change it, maybe. It's honestly very unclear. And apparently, at some point in that as yet unexplored, as of episode 4, Past Future, Space Morty got, or will get got, which leads Mullet Rick to use that entropy MacGuffin to reset his universe to back when Space Morty was an Earth baby, with plans to then abandon his family so that Morty won't grow up to get got again this time around, which means the future can be changed. What? Which is where Rick's C-137.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can change the future, but then I guess he can't be part of that changed future, right? Or maybe, I mean, I think they said that he's creating like a new future somewhere else, but it's not his or whatever.
Catches up with him back in episode 2 and immediately gets pissed at him for even thinking about leaving his family, which is really weird because the Rickest Rick's entire deal is that he absolutely does not give a single shit how other Ricks live their lives, let alone care enough to fist fight another one over his choices, though I am willing to give that a pass for rule of cool because it does lead to this big, crazy action scene where, due to the aforementioned...
Yeah, that was all cool, and I don't know why you keep bringing up these nitpicks, but since you don't seem to care about them, that's good. Okay. I mean, I guess it makes sense for you to write all this, but for me to having to respond to it, it would have been more convenient if it was more concise, but whatever.
MacGuffin, every time they punch each other, they jump to a different parallel universe, which would have been even cooler if they hadn't animated it in PowerPoint.
I guess even Rebirth can't care of it, dude. I'm the only reason you even have a place to exist right now. You should think twice before going ballistic on me.
It also sets up...
Yeah, it's pretty strange that they... Well, I mean, I don't mind the frame rate, even in the animation. I guess I don't know why they chose to make it relatively ugly, considering that I've seen, like, so many anime now on Crunchyroll, and they all have like really nice looking animation and visuals, and their stories are really stupid. This one actually has a fairly interesting story, but it looks just so awful. And I guess the only possible reason for why that might be is because they must have stupidly insisted that the animators get paid a reasonable amount. So they probably shouldn't have done that and just gone with a standard anime, and it would have looked great. But oh well.
One of the only funny jokes in the entire series so far, where they leave the equivalent of their mass in energy behind as this mini sun floating over the Smith house that the president immediately goes to war with every other country over, but then when the Ricks get back, it immediately disappears and everyone's left feeling very silly. If you ignore the janky-ass timing and delivery, that almost seems like a joke the cartoon would have made. That battle plays out in parallel with a B-plot about Space Beth infiltrating that Federation ship that's got the holodummy on it to steal some data or something, which leads to her getting ambushed and then having to fight Tammy, who's back now as an uncomfortably sexy anime cyborg. Fucking teeth, man. Also the eyes, they look like hentai parodies of themselves.
Yeah, it is very strange how it does. I mean, I guess like the whole thing looks like a parody of an anime, really. So it's very odd.
A fight that, thanks to the power of CGI, actually doesn't look like a PowerPoint presentation for once. Although it is kind of giving Family Guy back to the multiverse for the PlayStation 3.
I'll have to call you back.
When it's all over, Space Beth spares Phoenix Tammy and tells her to go be with her family, which she does in a post-credits scene, and that completely contradicts Bird Person's whole single dad arc since he came back, so I guess it's really not part of the main series timeline?
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess it wouldn't be. Yeah, I mean, like, it specifically couldn't be because, like, you wouldn't have Rick... like, resetting the universe to save Morty be part of the main timeline, right? So, whatever, I guess. I guess it would have been nice, but I assume it's, like, a pretty similar timeline. Do they ever mention the distinction of of Rick's special serial number that they give him. I mean, I guess those numbers are pretty arbitrary anyways. Like, I mean, I assume... No, I guess... I guess they might show, like, Rick going to a dimension where everything is anime, and then it's the Rick and Morty anime. That might happen in the show. So, I mean, it wouldn't be the same timeline either way. Yeah, because... Like, he even killed the version of himself that was in Space Jam, so he's possibly gonna be pretty mad about the anime, even though I think the anime was alright. You know, it's like it's definitely not one of the worst animes.
And I have no idea why the wiki page says it is, or why the show calls him Rick C-137. Seems like just using literally any different dimension code would have immediately cleared up all these apparent contradictions and questions. Not to say Sano can't do...
I mean, you just talk about the wiki then. I mean, I don't think those issues exist in the anime itself, but whatever.
Do whatever he wants with the story he's telling and whatever plot elements from the main series he wants to incorporate into it. I don't want to be some Szechuan sauce swilling comic book guy canon nitpicker over here, and the original creators did give him their explicit blessing to interpret things his own way. I just think, you know, anything that might have made this story even a bit less confusing would have been a huge improvement. And as proof of that, the show does kind of improve in episode 4, which tells a much less confusing story. It still jumps all over the place, with Rick turning into a sad Japanese businessman barfly version of himself one minute and the prisoner on death row the next, but once it clicks that those are all the same Rick phasing into different versions of reality as he navigates the wormhole, it's easy enough to follow and even appreciate the exploration of his character from all those different angles, to an extent. Though, I don't know if it entirely tracks that refusing to acknowledge the existence of Morty's alien anime girlfriend is what's keeping him trapped there. And I'm also not sold on the whole family gathering together for celebratory selfies when they get back either. It just doesn't seem like something the Smiths would do. Though...
Yeah, it would. They do some silly stuff, you know. They have, like, spaghetti dinner night or whatever. You don't know. Those selfies might be the hottest craze. And, you know, this guy is making a lot of halfway nice points about this. So it's... I don't know how he comes off as negative as much as well. Okay, I guess I gotta question the validity of this format, because I guess I might have been better off just pre-watching this. Maybe I'll pre-watch the stuff in the future. Let me know what you think, if you're even still listening at this point.
Ignoring Jerry when he gets himself into trouble certainly does. Hey, future Jeff here. Apparently, episode 5 is a continuation of the extremely minor Yakuza subplot from the Rick and Morty versus Genocider short, and also, just that specific episode is an actual Memento-style memory f***ery plot that doesn't involve any kind of time travel, unlike the rest of the anime, but is still told in nonlinear order. So, getting less confusing does not seem to be like an ongoing trend in this anime, just a minor aberration in episode 4.
Yeah, you know what else is getting... You know what else is really confusing here is the fact that you have seen the whole show, but then here you're talking like you haven't. So this is... The non-linearity of this video of me reacting to you is palpable, alright? It's a problem.
Just thought you guys should know that. I'll let past Jeff pick up from here. Also, in case the selfie thing didn't give it away, the humor has not improved one iota this episode. The whole mullet Rick flashback beat.
Well, the thing is that I personally think that Japanese people just have like such a weird sense of humor that I just don't get fully. That to me there would be no difference between an anime that's perfectly hilarious to Japanese people and this. So I guess no way to know. But I still thought it was pretty interesting, you know? I mean, it's not literally Rick and Morty hilarious, but still it's good for an anime.
plot hinges on the most basic conceivable version of the drug cartel, but they smuggle fried chicken joke that South Park did over a decade ago. Though at least we do get a bit more backstory on that bug fascist Yowie subplot.
Look, all I'm saying is we always go to my room. Why can't it be yours sometimes?
You think I'm hiding something?
Don't twist my words like that.
Riveting stuff. I know it sounds like I'm joking when I say that, and mostly I am, but these two dudes with their relationship problems give you more reason to care about their problems and them just by being upfront about what the problems are than just about any other character in this anime. Everything that both Ricks, the alien chick, and Space Morty have going on, what they want, what's at stake if they do or don't get it, is framed as part of the mystery, which leaves basically no hooks exposed to actually draw you into that mystery in the first place. The anime kind of just...
That's actually a pretty good criticism. Like, there's an ever-mounting mystery, and I think it feels pretty good when you get to it, but you actually have to watch the whole thing to experience the whole mystery, so that is true. It's not really... like... I mean, I think it's fun, but I see how there's no hooks for it for people, you know? I mean, to me, the mystery is fun itself, you know, just remembering stuff and then finding out what they mean later. I think that's pretty fun. But yeah, I see how that's a thing where people can get lost.
Assumes you'll already be invested because you care about the cartoon, and in theory that's not the worst idea, but in practice the versions of the cartoon characters that more than half of the plot hinges on are totally new entities, and the ones that we're supposed to be familiar with don't really act like themselves at all. We have no idea what Space Beth's goals are besides fight Federation. Regular Beth just kind of hangs out at home while the family does stuff and doesn't even get drunk. Summer's just Rick's guy in the chair, and Jerry's only defining character trait is shitting a lot. But maybe
Well, the thing is that I feel in Rick and Morty, like, these characters are kind of all over the place anyways, and their plots, they don't really follow through, you know. Sometimes Morty is about to break up with Rick, and then he needs him again, and like it's a whole back and forth forever. And then like the other family members disappear for whole episodes and whole seasons almost. Like, I mean, like there are very few actually really big arcs in Rick and Morty where it's like, oh yeah, like Jerry gets divorced, you know, and then like he has to find his way back to his marriage or not or whatever, you know. Like we got changes there, but like the characters are so usually just willing to go along with Rick's bullshit. That's mostly all they're there for, and in this case I guess Rick's bullshit is in this case just doing something for Morty for once, so that's interesting. I guess, even though it doesn't seem that way at first, but in the end it does seem like it's all about Morty. So that's, I thought that made sense for the actual characters of the show, and they are interpreted slightly different, which makes sense because of an anime, you know. Like, you wouldn't have the same kind of characters in an anime because they would, like, in anime everything has to matter so much. Everything has to be like so stereotypical. I don't know why, but it seems to be that way. So I think it's perfect in that way.
most jarring mischaracterization of all is Rick himself. Cartoon Rick is detached from the world around him and the people who care about him in a tragicomic, distinctly depressing sort of way, acting above it all while using his unfathomably vast intellect to indulge in his lowest impulses and most base desires, desperate for distraction from the pain of existing in a universe where almost everything objectively sucks, and he can prove it with math. path. Anime Rick seems more detached in the Buddhist sense, beyond it all, at peace with the uncaring universe, not just willfully numb to it. It's a subtle distinction, but a profound one that makes Rick seem less like himself and more like the robot version of himself he built to love his family for him while he was busy obsessively pursuing.
But I think that's perfect. I think that's the perfect characterization that you would see in an anime. Because a guy who's just depressively self-destructive isn't really the kind of guy who would be an anime protagonist. But a guy who is like Buddha, that's even Asian. That's even the perfect way to see Rick. I don't know how you can complain that it's not. Yeah, I mean, of course you're not gonna see Rick being like, oh hey Morty, I made a whole reality where you have a button where you kill yourself a million times by quick saving your spot, knock yourself out. Like, yeah, you wouldn't see like crazy sadistic Rick in this. Doesn't really make sense in an anime.
Revenge in season 6. And while that does make for a much more likable take on the character, it's also a far less funny one, which is why the original show used that twist to reset Rick after it was done exploring how the rest of the family might respond to a 22% more loving version of him. But that raises an important question, which really gets to the heart of whether or not this anime can work at all. Does Rick and Morty need to be funny? Or can it still work if it takes itself and its characters 100% seriously and embraces sincerity over sardonic satire? I mean, to be fair, some of the original show's most widely acclaimed moments are the bits where real emotion breaks through the many layers of irony, the characters confront themselves and permanently grow, and the continuity pays off after years of setup. But then, part of why those moments have the impact they do in the cartoon is because they're such a rare departure from the adult cartoon sitcom formula. And while I want to say that art doesn't need to be anything besides what the artist wanted to make, when you're talking about a spin-off of a massive franchise with millions of fans who expect a certain kind of thing from it, you kind of have to deliver enough of that thing to keep them satiated, or at least make sure whatever new thing you're doing is so awesome that they forget what's missing before getting bored and tuning out.
I mean, I'm all for having a more serious Rick and Morty. I think that would really work well, and that's why I was so hyped for the anime, because like there were silly things, but I could tell there was gonna be a lot more continuity. Or at least I was hoping to when I heard there'd be like a long series, because obviously it wasn't going to be like random plots as in the original series. So that was really good. But then, I mean, there were attempts at jokes, I guess. They just apparently didn't work too well for the people. But yeah, I mean, I think just exploring the backstory of the characters and everything would be already really good. So, I guess I don't know why specifically people weren't that into it, but I guess we'll have to see.
Especially if that spin-off relies so heavily on prior knowledge of the material that you have basically zero chance of grabbing any new fans. Like, I don't know how to feel about Morty being an unambiguous, unironic action badass. Usually in the cartoon, that's a sign of him working through some shit, you know?
Okay, buddy. All right, that's good. Good job. Time to go home.
But it would probably be a lot easier to swallow if the action actually was badass and didn't just alternate between being mediocre and happening mostly off screen. I generally enjoy watching passionate auteurs bring their uncompromised vision for art I like to life, even if that vision is very different from mine. After going through quite a few of these things,
I guess Space Morty was pretty interesting, and it makes sense perfectly for an anime that there would be at least one version of Morty that's really heroic and beloved by everyone. I guess in the actual show Rick and Morty always ends up being like a loser and he doesn't amount to anything. Like there was specifically in the comic there was like this one one comic where Morty tried to kill like Nazis in alternate realities, and in the end Rick just persuaded him that he doesn't have to do it because the other Mortys out there will do it, and then it turns out that all the Mortys were ending up just being lazy on the couch and none of them were fighting Nazis. So I think Morty's like, I guess pretty non-heroically classified most of the time, and then in the show actually we have him going back and fixing Rick's mistakes, like in the Portal Boys episode. So I guess he is heroic in his own way, and he's getting more badass, like when he's saving Planet Tina. I think that wasn't working. That wasn't him working through anything. I think that was just him putting his best foot forward and putting everything he's got into this one girl, you know. And well, it wasn't his fault that she turned out to be a psychopath. I think it makes sense to have at least the anime version of Rick and of Morty being a badass. Yeah, and he wasn't even the only he wasn't even the only Morty of the anime. So this is not a great complaint. And then he's gonna shit on the new Mario Bros. Movie that everyone loved. Oof. At least that one I'm not the lone defender on. At least many people liked it, and only the critics hated it.
In my time, I've come to realize that's almost always preferable to a safe copy-paste job of the thing I already have to fill the corporate coffers, which is why I've really come around on Riverdale over the years. But when that vision ends up being compromised anyway by external forces like the budget or studio meddling or behind-the-scenes production drama, well, then you just find yourself feeling...
I mean, the budget didn't really change what the anime was gonna achieve much. I mean, it didn't look as good as it could have, but like I'm pretty sure they achieved everything they were gonna achieve, you know, so this doesn't really make sense.
Disappointed, both as a fan of the original thing and as someone curious to give the new thing a shot. And even if Takashi Sano does have some big revelation waiting on the back burner that ties this crazy jumble of a plot together into something satisfying and coherent, unless it's some 12 out of 10 mind blower of a twist that elevates the script to the point it makes up for everything else, I know I'm still gonna be left with that bittersweet taste.
This fucker! God, it's so... So he didn't see the final episode after all. God damn it! It's so unclear! Okay, this may have been on me. This may have been a big waste of time, but yeah. Well, I guess at least we know that at this point in the show it wasn't really good for anyone. Do I want to watch the rest of this video, or do I want to go to the next video? Well, I want to put the next video before this, so you get the better reaction first. Well, who knows? No, let's continue listening, I guess.
Taste in my mouth. And even if he does pull that long shot off, which is possible, dropping you into the deep end in medias res before dragging you back to the shallows to explain how shit really works is a pretty standard playbook for mind-fucky time travel anime, and he did do a really good job with Tower of God. To be frank, I don't know if that will actually satisfy most Rick and Morty fans, even if they do stick with the anime.
Yeah, I think the ending was pretty satisfying in that specific way, and I guess now I want to see this Tower of God thing. That sounds pretty interesting. I hope there's a dub. But yeah, I guess he doesn't have much to say here other than like he hopes it's gonna be good.
Reason Rick doesn't f with time travel has nothing to do with the despair of being unable to undo the effects of the Omega device or any past/future run-ins he may have had or prevented himself from.
I'm not even sure that's true. I'm pretty sure he could probably undo the Omega device if he wanted to. I mean, like, he's gotta be able to, right? Otherwise, would that mean that the Omega device could just permanently erase all of space? What would happen then? Would there be a new Big Bang? And it would have to be all different stuff than it was before. I mean, pretty sure if you go back in time, you stop the Omega device, you probably would save Beth, but I think yeah, who knows? I mean, he might be... Well, I guess I don't know. Don't know if the Omega device beats time travel. Though I think Rick basically should be able to defeat the Omega device if he wanted to. I think he probably just doesn't think that that's a good solution. Probably doesn't think that it's wise undoing time for that reason. But then again, he does go back in time to do something with snakes. That wasn't really that important. Yeah, Rick and Morty. So much to think about.
Having with the 4D testicle cops, it's because time travel stories are inherently fiddly and confusing, even when they do make sense, and trying to make sense of them often takes a lot of effort on the viewer's part, which, when you walk away from that still feeling confused, completely contravenes Rick and Morty's greatest strength as a comedy. Its ability to make the viewer feel smart. The whole "you have to have a super high IQ to appreciate Rick and Morty" meme became a meme in the first place because obviously you don't. It's an adult animated sitcom that was wildly successful in America. The writers...
You motherfucker. Wow. Oh yeah, I guess if it's in America, I guess everyone is stupid. Okay. Yeah, it's just impossible that it's a smart show. I mean, he's just so privileged and condescending here. Like, obviously, if you watch Rick and Morty, you'd have to pause it a lot. Like, if you have like you have to have a really high media literacy. And you need to know a lot about certain scientific concepts that come up in like one episode and then they disappear. Like usually they get explained to some extent, but not to an extent that would teach you like all about them. Okay, so there's definitely a lot of basic education that you would need to understand everything about Rick and Morty. But I mean, obviously you can just enjoy the poop jokes. I guess that's allowed. And if you watch each episode more times, then the more you'll understand. So obviously, it's not a huge requirement to have the big IQ, but I mean, I think it helps. But yeah, just shit on Rick and Morty. Cool.
Are clearly smart. Harmon might be a goddamn genius, but instead of writing to show off how smart they are and impress critics and other smart people, they've figured out how to condense and, in some cases, distort big, intimidating, existential, and scientific ideas into a concise, digestible 24-minute format that anyone can understand and, most importantly, laugh at.
I mean, I don't think that anyone could understand it, but laugh at, yes, definitely. That's probably one of the things that the people who think they're smart hate about it, is that it's like more understandable than like the concepts on their own, you know, because like it's so visual and you can see how these concepts work. But all right, let's see what hilarious joke you got here.
Nobody exists on purpose. Nobody belongs anywhere. Everybody's gonna die. Come watch TV.
You don't
That wasn't funny. Oh well.
corner the novelty bong market and reinvent how McDonald's does limited run menu items with a TV show made exclusively for Primer understanders. And as it stands, even as someone...
Hey, Primer is overrated and it's not worth understanding, okay? I've only seen it once and I might be talking out of my ass, but I did not enjoy it, alright?
who likes Primer and Memento and Bakano and Higurashi and Tatami Galaxy and the Zero Escape games, and generally f***s with time loops and nonlinear plots and dreamlike uncertainty in the media I consume, I'm struggling to enjoy this thing. Because, again, the show doesn't just bury the truth of what's going on in its crazy jumble of interdimensional timelines, it buries any motivation a viewer might have to care about unjumbling them in the first place. I'm here doing it, rewatching the series in 2 languages to piece this puzzle together, because it's literally my job. And I'd be lying if I said I didn't reach any satisfying aha moments in that journey, but I also get those moments sometimes when I'm picking apart my channel analytics, and I wouldn't exactly recommend that as a recreational activity.
It's so... This guy's criticism is such a pain in the ass, and I hate him, okay? It's like, oh yeah, I didn't hate it, but I also like collecting stamps, and I'm an asshole, and you're an asshole, and everyone's an asshole. Wow, what shitty criticism.
As it stands, trying to understand and appreciate Rick and Morty the anime feels like work. It's a challenging show, but not the refined, carefully tuned sort of challenge that makes you actually want to conquer it with a clear promise of a satisfying reward at the end, like a good Souls game, or a good Souls game. It's more akin to one of those interesting but deeply flawed indie Souls-likes that make Iron Pineapple say, keep working on it, devs. You've got something cool here. Where the...
I got that reference. That's actually cool, but I don't know. I feel like Souls games don't actually have a satisfying ending. Like, you just start over. And it's like, oh yeah, you light yourself on fire. Cool, that was worth it. I usually just go back to PvP, you know? So it's actually better not to beat the final boss for that. Whatever. That was a tangent. I'm sorry.
Stank of janky technical failings and weird execution is going to turn 99% of players away before they sniff what it really has cooking. At the end of the day, I can't bring myself to hate Rick and Morty the anime, but I also can't bring myself to like it, let alone recommend it, because on a fundamental level, it's just not very well made. I'm probably gonna keep going to the end just to see where Sano's going with it, because he does have me genuinely curious, but I can't blame anyone who doesn't want to stick with it, or...
Okay, I really have to make a point to never watch this guy's videos again. That was such a pain in the ass, and his conclusion is so stupid as well. Like, oh, I don't hate it, I don't love it. Oh, jeez, I don't feel any particular way about it. Jeez, oh man, it's almost as if he was Rick Sanchez without realizing it. Oh my god, this is a very unflattering picture to pause on. Yeah, this fucking guy, and it was so long, and then the title is "This Anime Hurts My Brain." You'd think that would be clearly like a hateful thing to say, and he says it's not well made, but then he's still very lukewarm on it. So if he had to rate it out of 10, would it be 5 or 6? I don't know. I mean, if it was 6 out of 10, I'd be fine with that. If it was 4 out of 10, that would just be ridiculous, because the story is certainly more interesting than most animes that I've seen. But oh well.
Or give it a try in the first place. For those of you who at least want to know how it all shakes out, though, I will be reporting back with my findings when it's all said and done, most likely on our second channel, Basement.
Ah, you motherfucker, you've hidden this from me. I was looking through your main channel. God, you suck so much, and I have to watch this too? Oh my god, what a piece of shit channel this is. Oh my god. Oh, this is pure suffering. The life of an anti-reviews is pure suffering. Alright. Not even a link to it. He didn't even put a link to it. It's so annoying. This is such sloppy work, man. Basement Life. $60K subscribers, alright. Rick and Morty. Nothing! He did nothing! Oh my god, he didn't bother finishing his work. Maybe just Rick? Maybe just Morty? You motherfucker, you didn't do your fucking job. And that's not the right video.
Life, unless this video's a big enough hit to justify double dipping, of course. In the meanwhile, if you're looking for an actually good anime adaptation of a Western sci-fi property, Terminator Zero turned out to f surprisingly hard.
I'm not sure I've seen this. I think I may have seen... Oh, yeah, I have. Yeah, that was really good, actually, yeah. So is that what... No, the thing he showed at first was still a Witcher thing, I think. So I need to look that up, too. Man, Mother Basement, you are such a piece of shit. I can't believe that you reviewed this at like 5 episodes and you didn't bother finishing the job of reviewing the whole thing. That is so fucking low. Oh my god.
And I put out a whole video on that last week. And if you want an existentially horrifying dark sci-fi comedy that'll actually scratch your Rick and Morty itch, I don't have a video on it yet, but Dead Demons Dead Destruction is a fucking masterpiece, quite possibly anime of the year, and everyone needs to stop sleeping on it at their earliest convenience.
I really need to find better anime recommendations, because I have Crunchyroll right now and there's so much good stuff out there, but then there's also a lot of generic crap, which I guess you would expect considering that they're just exponentially releasing more anime all of the time.
Pickle Jeff, professional Rick Bag, signing out from Anywhere But Therapy.
Oh hey, Scott Pilgrim, that was a good one too. Wow. I guess he's probably just spoiled by knowing all of the best shit, but Rick and Morty anime is actually really good. And he's a really shit reviewer, because this was a trash video. Alright, let's cleanse our palate by going to the next video that someone else made, which is probably a more honest rant about Rick and Morty. The anime.
Rick and Morty the anime has come and gone, and the Rick and Morty fandom seems to have unilaterally met the entire thing with a resounding, "Why does this exist?" Personally, I was pretty curious to see what Rick and Morty might look like through the mind of a completely different creative from an entirely different culture, particularly because some of those previous Rick and Morty anime shorts were very cool. However, what we've ended up with, I think, was something far too ambitious for its own good, and a bit too far removed from why people like the original Rick and Morty in the first place. That isn't to say I thought it was all bad. There are some really interesting ideas within this project, but I do not think Adult Swim or the creatives behind this project did themselves any favors in how this story was presented to us.
God, this is so much better. I enjoy this guy's way of saying things in a concise manner so much more than this Mother Basement waffle that we've just had to go through. Wow.
Untangling the story of Rick and Morty the anime is not particularly easy in itself, so today let's try our best to navigate this entire project and not only make sense of the narrative, but the thought process in producing it. So I do think that one of the major failures of Rick and Morty the anime was in how it was sold and presented to the audience. I do not think it was made very clear exactly what this thing was supposed to be. Reading through the comments on Twitter and Reddit and various YouTube videos, there were countless people just confused as to why this didn't feel at all like Rick and Morty. And that, to me, is a failure in marketing, because in my mind, I don't see any reason to make Rick and Morty the anime if it's just going to feel like the original show. What's the point in that? But I also think your marketing needs to reflect this. Now, some of the people behind the show did make this kind of clear.
We didn't want to marvelize it. We just wanted this to feel like another artist's take on the material.
But I don't think the advertising itself really pushed this concept.
I don't know how that's possible, because they've put out these shorts about the anime and they were like so clearly this, you know? They were so clearly a complete revision, revisitation, reboot, or whatever. They were completely different from the series, and I think anyone should have expected this, but whatever, I guess we'll see.
So, I think a lot of people went in expecting this to feel like Rick and Morty and not like a completely different creative endeavor using the characters and backdrop of the Rick and Morty universe. Adult Swim should have done a much better job selling this idea to the audience, but I also think that maybe Adult Swim should have questioned if there was as much of an appetite for this as they seemed to think there was. Sure, the Rick and Morty anime shorts did mostly very well on YouTube, but when making a full-on series, I think maybe they should have considered finding a bit of middle ground between the irreverent nature of the original show and the very serious and confusing tone and story of this anime. Especially
I guess that's an interesting point to make. Well, the thing is, like, if they want to do it, then they should do it. They shouldn't consider, the audience, they might not like it because it doesn't have enough fart jokes. Well, enough jokes in it, I guess, because it seems that they're able to do pretty much anything with Rick and Morty that they want to do, you know? I feel like the team behind Rick and Morty, or mostly Dan Harmon, I guess, is able to do whatever he wants, and maybe this was a low enough effort that it was just a no-brainer to just do it. Maybe he could have found someone better, or maybe this pitch was perfect, and then maybe the pitch didn't deliver. But I think, like you would definitely want to create this anime, even if it doesn't perfectly land, you know? Like, it's not gonna hurt the show in total, so why not?
Especially because some of the anime shorts by the series creator, Takashi Sano, felt like they had an entirely different tone and pace than this series does. Rick and Morty vs. Genocider is much more straightforward and action-heavy. It's a cool short, and they took a very different approach for this show. Takashi Sano wrote and directed and designed and key animated every single episode. That in itself is just a completely different workflow than the incredibly collaborative process taken for the mainline Rick and Morty series. And for Sano, it was a little bit less about writing a Rick and Morty story and more about really using the world as the foundation for his own storytelling.
For him, the process was to deconstruct it and to refit it, and it's kind of like a puzzle that he had to put together. And so that's the approach that he took while making his own version of Rick and Morty.
Now, right off the bat, I want to say, no, I did not particularly like Rick and Morty the anime. However, I was...
No! Another hater! Well, I mean, like, scrambling together like a new puzzle would be the Rick and Morty way of handling it, you know? Like, that's pretty much how Rick and Morty handles whatever source material it parodies in its episodes. So I think this would have made a lot of sense. But too bad that maybe the Rick and Morty fans actually didn't have the IQ that was required after all for this one. Who knows?
Pretty disappointed to see so many content creators quickly go all in on videos, adding to the chorus of, wow, this thing sucks. Not because it didn't.
Yeah, it was really terrible how many people were just crying about it. I really should have... Well, I guess it's too bad he didn't even bother finishing the fucking anime, especially you, Modest Basement, you piece of shit. I can't believe they're just hating it without having seen the whole series, but yeah, it's heartbreaking. However, will this possibly greatest franchise of all time survive? Who knows?
Suck, but because so many people did this after one single episode had released, and that premiere episode makes it abundantly clear that this story is not being told linearly. That isn't to say that this makes the premiere easier to watch or lets it off the hook narratively, but I guess I just didn't find much value in the commentary that largely stated I didn't understand what was happening, when it was clear the intention for the story was to be initially confusing. I understand why people didn't enjoy watching that first episode, but at the very least I would have hoped people would have given the show the opportunity to add the context it's obviously foreshadowing and make the nonlinear premiere make more sense. I do also understand that this is often my approach when critiquing things. I always try my best to meet things on their level and understand the tone and story they're trying to tell, even if those things don't always work for me. This series has the baggage of a pretty demanding and exacting fan base that is not afraid to share their opinion on how things should be. And so without properly conveying exactly what this anime was trying to do ahead of time, it's pretty understandable that the fan base didn't have much interest in waiting for that needed context.
I guess it's too bad because the Rick and Morty fan base is so spoiled by the fact that Rick and Morty is the best show ever and every single episode is permanently rewatchable and perfect on every level, so that whenever something comes along and it has more build up, then they can't stomach to go through it, I guess. I guess they've been spoiled by perfection.
Now, did the eventual context make the story work? No, not entirely, but some of it did work, and I do think the nonlinear storytelling in the premiere lends to the entire anime's central device, which is that this new character, Elle, experiences all of time non-linearly herself. Every experience Elle has or will have in the past and the future exists in her mind as memories already, and I think the premiere is trying to invoke this idea by jumping between various moments in time in a jumbled way. Again, that isn't to say this works. I think that perhaps Takashi Sano intended for this jumbled mystery to be more compelling than it actually was. People were far more confused than intrigued, and that is why they didn't give it the time of day. I think it was too ambitious right off the bat, but many of the issues I had with the confusing premiere did pay off in interesting ways later in the...
I really like that his main criticism is that it was too ambitious and it didn't quite live up to what it was trying to do, because I think that's probably the best way to fail, is probably to be too ambitious. So I'm happy about that, at least. Can't really disagree too hard on it, because, it was definitely confusing. So let's keep listening and see what else he has to say.
Series, though other aspects remained very confusing to me and still remain very confusing to me. It's easy to understand why people were confused watching the premiere episode Girl Who Manipulates Time, even though that title should maybe have been a little bit of a giveaway, but it really felt like it was just doing way too much. Not only did they choose to portray things non-linearly, jumbling up the series of events and showcasing an older Morty's death without any real explanation, but they also explained that for much of the episode, Morty was spending his time within a VR game/world. This is way too much of a hat on a hat, if you ask me, because the audience is fully under the impression that the jumbly mess of events in time are happening within a VR game, and they don't really clarify why this was happening until the 8th episode of the show.
I meant for it to be virtual, but I used some portal liquid to make the experience seem more real, and a different dimension got mixed in.
I think things like this would have gone a really long way if they had just simply been explained sooner. Other aspects...
Yeah, they tried to do a lot in the first one. I forgot that it was all about that game, but yeah. Like in Rick and Morty, every episode is pretty standalone, so you would definitely want to expect them to have like a really strong episode with a strong hook in the first episode at least, that sets up everything in a more gradual way. And maybe the budget was cut after all, and that VR game would have been really epic with the fight scenes, and it wasn't because the art style didn't live up to it. But who knows?
of this story sort of hinge on the eventual reveals that recontextualize scenes we've already seen, but the whole VR angle mostly just confuses the more important Elle narrative that they're trying to tell. But this first episode was meant to briefly introduce us to Elle and hint at her prior connection/relationship with Morty. It was also supposed to introduce us to long-haired Rick and also to Frank, who is still the biggest, most confusing element in the story to me, but we'll get to him later. And all things considered, throughout the giant web of a narrative they're telling in this intentionally confusing and nonlinear fashion, I did find some of these characters and ideas relatively compelling across the series. Mainly the characters Elle, long-haired Rick, and Space Morty. Now, I presume that because Elle perceives time all at once, this was why they made the creative decision to showcase the chronological narrative completely non-chronologically. Not just in the premiere, but across the whole show. God, this is just such a weird narrative to try and talk about, simply because it is so jumbled, so I think it's maybe best to go through it chronologically. Looking at things from a bird's eye view, the backstory is most everything involving long-haired Rick, Space Morty, and the alien version of Elle, whereas everything that is happening in the present, for lack of a better term, primarily involves our Rick, Morty, the Smith family, and human Elle. And the real bulk of this backstory is told in episodes 3, 4, 6, and 7. Elle is from an alien species that can perceive the future and past simultaneously.
She can perceive the moment of her death at the moment of her birth.
This is a species that the Galactic Federation has wiped out entirely, making Elle the last surviving member of that species. Meanwhile, this dimension follows this long-haired version of Rick, as well as Space Morty, who is a much cooler, warrior-like version of Morty. Basically, these characters meet, fall in love, and with Elle's support, both as a partner and warrior, Space Morty becomes this...
I guess I should have mentioned that there'd be spoilers here, but yeah, we're going through the spoilers. So this is... I mean, you haven't been spoiled on the ending yet. You should still watch it if you're gonna watch it, I guess. But yeah, interesting to hear about this. I like how Elle is the last survivor of this space race, who is able to see the future and live it all the time, you know. And yet they've allowed for the Federation to come along and kill them. It's so stupid. But you know, that's just the kind of plot you're gonna get, because like either you can't have a race that lives through time in that way, because they would just, I mean, you would just think they would take over the universe or whatever. So they have to be killed off in some way, or maybe this gift is extremely rare. But the way it's made rare is because they just end up getting genocided by the Federation, even though they could have easily used their gifts to fight the Federation. And then Elle kind of fights against the Federation at times, but all she really cares about is Morty. So this is a very nonsensical plot, which is funny because this is an anime, so it makes perfect sense that it's nonsensical. Yeah. The perfect blend, the perfect blend of Rick and Morty and anime.
Monumentally important freedom fighter in his dimension.
I feel like the two of us can do anything when we're together.
However, after falling in love and achieving success beyond his wildest dreams, on one of their missions, Space Morty is killed. I think the most interesting thing this narrative does is ruminate on the idea of free will. For a character like Elle, free will only exists moment to moment, because she already knows the entirety of her own story. So she knew Morty would be killed on this mission.
I've been experiencing this moment for all eternity.
And so for a character like Elle, who because of the nature of her species doesn't really get to experience free will in the same way others do, she sort of plays with fate as a means to achieve her own kind of free will. I know that sounds like nonsense, but hear me out. Elle's solution is to convince long-haired Rick to do an experiment with her in which they convert her body into antimatter, which essentially will either restart the universe or make time flow backwards. As it turns out, long-haired Rick realizes that he and Elle have been doing this experiment over and over again.
We've been doing the same experiment in an infinite loop, haven't we?
Basically, Elle's gambit is that if they do this experiment enough times, continually resetting their universe, eventually the chaos of that process will change something in the ensuing universe enough to change their fate entirely, so that she won't have to just experience the same life over and over again, and might find one where she can continue to live with Morty. And the universe where this happens is the one we follow for most of this story, where the human version of Elle finally reunites with this main universe's Morty.
I just knew it. I knew we'd see each other again.
It really is a complete mess of a narrative. It's wildly confusing and yada yadas over the most important sci-fi devices, but I respect the ideas it's exploring for the characters at the very least. I think Elle's conundrum is really compelling. It honestly...
I'm also happy that Morty finally gets to have a romance that actually pays off, okay? So just let me have this.
Almost reads like Takashi Sano incorporating his own writer's point of view into a narrative in a more creative way. A character who knows how everything will turn out and sees the story as a whole, just like a writer does when looking back or forward at something they've written or are going to write. I just think this is a really fascinating motivation for a character. It's a real escalation of a thing that many people actually feel, as though their life has been written for them and there's nothing they can do to change the trajectory of that life. And here is a character for whom this is quite literally the case. And yet, she does still find a way. She is unable to rewrite the story herself, so instead, she finds a way to change how the story is written, if that tracks at all for you. Okay, let's talk Rick. In general, the Ricks portrayed in Rick and Morty the anime are a tiny bit kinder and more sentimental than the ones we see in the main series, but we particularly see this in long-haired Rick. And because of Elle's gambit, where she's helped set in motion this experiment that restarts the universe, long-haired Rick has basically unknowingly lived through the loss of his Morty over and over again. And though he doesn't remember each one, it's basically implied that he sort of feels that this has happened over and over. He feels that collective loss. And because of this, he does something differently that actually ends up being the thing that changes the ensuing universe.
Do me a favor when you see me again and tell me this. There is meaning to be found in the meaningless.
A lot of the logic...
Wait, so does that mean that the long-haired Rick is the only one who's restarting the universe with Elle each time, and then the other timelines are unaffected by this? Interesting. But then him doing that reset the main timeline that we're witnessing in the anime. I love time travel plots, okay? There's so many ways to think about them.
For the sci-fi aspects of the series is really flimsy, but it all stems from a desire to explore core aspects of the humanity of these characters. And in a way, they are sort of dissecting aspects of the original show as well. I think there is meaning to be found in the meaningless is honestly a pretty decent way to boil down the themes of Rick and Morty and Rick's character in the main series. It also feels like the series was meant to have a bit more focus on the ongoing narrative and less on episodic stories, sort of the opposite of what we see in the mainline show. However, I think because the anime story story asks so many confusing questions, it makes those detours into more episodic fare stand out even more, and almost distract from the bigger picture, even if they do come back into play later. The episode I think of most specifically in this regard is episode 5, which veers off into a Jerry-centric story. Honestly, Jerry in general is treated very strangely in this series. Even though I see how they were sort of trying to subvert the existing Jerry, and a lot of the show seems to be about how our surrounding circumstances can change who we become, I think Jerry is seen as slightly less pathetic overall. Rick defends him in ways that mainline Rick would not be caught dead doing.
Jerry knows how to get things done when the chips are down, trust me.
But this 5th episode explores this most thoroughly, with a flashback to the jacked Cronenberged Jerry, dropping into this dimension to try and teach this Jerry to be more heroic. And he ends up donning this whole superhero persona, complete with spandex and a huge sword. I think the one thing I found really interesting about this idea and how it's implemented later is that Jerry asked Rick for a mind wipe, Morty's mind blower style, so Jerry's entire superhero persona exists in this memory vial that can be reintegrated into Jerry at any time, which is very superhero. It's very He-Man and Power Sword, sort of Billy Batson Shazam-y, even a little Bruce Banner Incredible Hulky, a trigger to turn him into the superhero, and honestly a really fun way to integrate this device from Rick and Morty lore into a more traditional superhero trope. That being said, this episode really does feel like such a detour, and I think it represents my issue.
Yeah, I enjoyed the Hero Jerry episode a lot. It's amazing how many really interesting concepts that are really relevant to Rick and Morty are here, and people have just completely overlooked them because I guess the anime wasn't exciting enough at first.
Issues with this show as a whole pretty well. It's got a lot of interesting ideas that are just buried in a really confusing package. A package that is not particularly fun to watch. Where it has ambitious concepts, it fails to showcase them in execution. The series culminates in this big, epic final battle against the Galactic Federation in episodes 8 and 9. Rick and Morty discover L's fate-based gambit and are faced with the consequences of it as well, to save L or to save their dimension.
What do you want to do, Morty? Huh? She might want you to be the one who decides.
In that big battle, Summer fights in a giant mech, Beth is relatively badass with a gun, and it even loops superhero Jerry back in, so that detour did at least serve a purpose. Overall, it's fine. Sort of mindless action, which I guess is what was so cool about Rick and Morty vs. Genocider, but to me, the most interesting aspect of the end of this series are those character stakes. Morty has to reconcile with the fact that though he is in love with Elle, he is an alternate version of the person that Elle actually fell in love with.
Morty.
The Morty who you loved is dead and not coming back! I wish I was, but I'm just not the Morty you fell in love with!
And though Elle's Gambit did reshape fate and give her this opportunity to be with a version of Morty again, it also had massive unintended consequences that are now her responsibility to resolve. And she ultimately sacrifices herself to fix those unintended consequences, which isn't groundbreaking, it's pretty standard actually, but the personal journeys reconciling with this are more what interested me. And maybe more interestingly, the series didn't end with this sacrifice. They actually linger for one more episode to showcase how that trauma sort of sits with and affects Morty, and what he does to cope with it, which loops us back into that VR world from the first episode. And I am once again pretty mixed on this final episode. It basically explores Morty experiencing an entire lifetime in VR and actually living his life out with Elle. They get married, they get a house together, they have a baby, Morty becomes a used car salesman, and it shows Morty live a lifetime of love and mistakes, and then his attempts to make up for those mistakes, which I think is interesting enough. It's what the show is sort of about. But the crux of this entire VR lifetime is something that still completely vexes me. This damn Frank guy. Who is this? We were briefly introduced to him in VR in the first episode. He seemed to recognize Morty. They had some kind of relationship within the VR. I don't know where this took place in time. Maybe it's from an alternate dimension. And then in this episode, he can...
Yeah, I guess if he's thinking of what Mother's Basement said, that he would have been in an alternate dimension. Because there was portal fluid mixed in the VR. Well, yeah, I mean, I think this is such a good anime plotline where it's like, oh, the girl has to sacrifice herself to save the world, even though I guess she probably endangered the world in the first place with trying to rewrite fate. And then Morty has to get over it, and then he lives out alive in VR. That's interesting. Normally Rick would be able to fix anything like that, probably. Just, I don't know. Probably be able to to fix Elle having to die in order to save the universe. He probably could just recreate the energy that Elle creates by sacrificing herself, you know, but it's an anime and everything has to have a deep meaning, so Rick can't just save the day with his sci-fi bullshit.
Continues to approach Morty and tries to give him a job. Actually, not just a job, co-ownership in this entire business empire. And then Morty's jealousy of this man leads him to feelings of unworthiness, which leads him to abandoning Elle and his daughter Maria, while Frank takes care of them. But who the hell is Frank? I don't understand where he comes from. Is he a VR character? Is he from another dimension? How does he know Morty? Why does he revere him?
But I wasn't going to come. Not until I had turned myself into a man who's worthy of you.
Why is the whole ending of this series hinging on this random, underexplained character? I don't hate the ways it explores Morty's struggles across a lifetime.
Awesome.
I just don't know who this is. It's a very weird and baffling way to end a series that already had a massively confusing structure. There must just be something I'm missing about Frank. Somebody explain Frank to me in the comments, please. I really do like the idea of Morty using VR to cope with the loss of Elle, but I just don't think it does enough to tie to the story we were told over the season. Sure, it's kind of interesting to mainline this whole life and relationship and see Morty struggle with jealousy and feelings of inadequacy. I just wish it were more clearly tied to a lesson Morty needed to learn through his coping mechanism, through his attempts to grapple with the trauma from his brief relationship with the real Elle. I think we can expect that Morty, now having lived this life and learned these hard lessons, will go forward in his actual life better equipped. I guess when it comes down to it, thematically, this episode does decently fall in line with the other ideas explored in the series. I do think, as heavy-handed as it might be, this last line is basically the message this show is trying to convey.
In this world devoid of meaning, doing what we can to live our lives to the fullest is the most precious and meaningful thing there is.
I just wish the narrative was a little bit neater. And though I found the entire Jumbly narrative to be really exhausting and hard to follow, I do have to admit that some of the ways these ideas came back around were at least somewhat satisfying for me. In particular, that final tag scene was actually a really beautiful and fitting bookend. The series opened with the Galactic Federation prepping to assault this planet, and this tag actually brings us back to that moment one last time. But it actually reveals that this was the mission where Space Morty and Elle met for the very first time.
Thanks for the assist. I'm Morty.
I'm Elle. And it's nice to meet you, Morty.
And as presented with this confusing...
Yeah, that was really poetic and beautiful. Well, I'm glad I watched this video to explain it to me again. But yeah, one day I'll rewatch the anime and it'll all be beautiful and make sense. Good thing I gave you a spoiler warning, you know. Sure hope you didn't skip the spoiler warning by accident. But whatever, you probably don't care about watching the specific stuff I like.
Non-linear narrative and the show jumping back and forth and not really revealing its whole hand about when and where certain events take place, this reveal, shockingly, worked great for me. I really liked it. It ends where it begins with a new context, and isn't that sort of what the entire show hinges on?
You know, that's probably one of the main reasons why I like the Rick and Morty anime so much, is because endings are to me the most important things about anime, or no, about anything really, any show. Like, a movie can be mostly terrible, as long as it all makes sense in the end and the ending is really good, then I will love it. And that's why I hated The Northman, because like, the whole thing was some stupid subversion of how everything is disgusting and lame, and then in the end it's like, oh, and then his heirs became kings and queens. It's like, no, he just brawled a random guy on a volcano. This has nothing to do with his heirs becoming kings and queens. This is nonsense. And that was the final insult to why I hate that movie.
At the very least, this series ended on a nice note for me. And I did find the series' musings on free will somewhat compelling. And though the sci-fi aspects are basically magical nonsense, they at least explore humanity in an interesting way. And the lengths people will go for love, even a person who is omniscient of the entirety of their own existence, attempts to reshape fate itself and the consequences of doing so. Overall, the ideas are very heady and spiritual, which again, though I find them interesting, I don't think really mesh very well with your typical Rick and Morty audience. I'm sure I've talked enough about all the aspects of the narrative that I did find compelling for people to already be commenting that I liked the show way too much. And again, I want to be clear, while I did enjoy aspects of it, I did not really enjoy the process of watching it. And that's all that matters, right? I think for a lot of fans of Rick and Morty, this is just a bit too far removed from the source material to really connect.
And I think that one absolutely undeniable failure is the comedy department. Rick and Morty is a comedy series, and though the anime seems to attempt jokes, it does so far less frequently and far, far, far less effectively.
I mean, the only thing I'm guilty of is causing our toilet to flush constantly, which hardly compares.
What even is this joke? That Jerry shits a lot? I don't understand. I think this might be where the sole creative vision aspect of the anime really fails, because comedy in particular is something best made in collaboration. Pitching and workshopping jokes.
Yeah, that might have been the reason, yeah. I mean, I personally know that this show would have never lived up to the comedy of Rick and Morty, so it's probably fine they didn't attempt it too hard, but I guess they could have worked on it a little longer. Could have tried to make better jokes, but not more jokes. Please don't add more random jokes.
Figuring out how best to deliver them, working through delivery and structure, that's how comedy thrives. And even though this is a completely different vision for Rick and Morty, I don't think it's unreasonable for people to have expected it to be funny. That's one of the major draws for Rick and Morty. I also think another sort of misstep in this anime is that Rick and Morty exists in this multiversal world, which gives it the opportunity to tell so many different kinds of stories without messing up continuity or lore, and yet it seems like this anime chose to use the C-137 version of Rick that we follow in the main show.
Yeah,
it felt like the
care.
entire point was to showcase an anime possibility somewhere else in the multiverse, and yet they seemed to intrinsically tie it to the existing Rick through dialogue. He mentions that he's from Universe C-137, not to mention it heavily features Space Beth, a character we have yet to see outside of the main universe that Rick and Morty follows. It also showcases the ripped original Jerry who exists in the Cronenberg universe, even though he was killed by Rick Prime in season 6 of the main show, so it ties itself to these existing...
It doesn't matter, they just said the word, okay? They just said the number. It doesn't mean it's the same universe. Obviously it's not gonna be the same universe. Whatever.
Versions of the characters we recognize from the mainline show, and even go so far as to...
I mean, we know for a fact that it isn't, because it's got a different art style. Like, if it was a different art style, it'd be a different universe. Like...
to explicitly claim they are the same versions, only for the portrayals themselves to be completely incongruous with the other series' events. I think it really would have behooved them to just make it clear that the...
I can't believe people are so hung up about the fact that he just said, like, oh, it's the same timeline, you know, the same number. see something. I keep forgetting it. Too much autism. C31? I don't know.
These are completely separate versions of these characters, but...
Like, we know that, like, timelines can split and stuff anyways. Like they have subsections, you know. C31-7 or whatever. He might have, like, an A, B, or C appendix to the universe. Maybe it was split, and maybe our Rick created the anime by splitting his timeline at this point, you know. Like, you're just being pedantic when you're thinking about, oh, it's the same timeline, so now everything has to be perfect. No, it doesn't. It's fine. It's just a throwaway thing that Rick says, okay? Maybe he split the timeline and he forgot he split the timeline. He's still going by the old designation.
Instead, they sort of walk the line awkwardly and clumsily. And I think that ultimately, though I did personally find some satisfaction in the reveals and the sort of cyclical nature of the narrative, some of the moments that they tied together across time and dimensions, it just wasn't enough to justify how confusing the narrative felt for most of the duration of the season. I really respect the ambition in a project like Rick and Morty the anime. Tons of the ideas are really interesting, especially when doing these kinds of deep dive analysis types of videos, but in the end, the execution left far too much to be desired. It really feels like a story filled with some great ideas that could have used a few more eyeballs on it to help shape into a narrative that was more palatable to general audiences and maybe draws a bit more tonally from the mainline series, so as not to alienate those who are expecting more Rick and Morty. I am glad Rick and Morty the anime exists, but I see it as a bit of a monument to failed potential. And I think a lot of fans of Rick and Morty are going to see this entire endeavor as meaningless. But hey,
there is meaning to be found in the meaningless. Johnny Two Cellos. I stay mellow watching Johnny Two Cellos. He talks.
Yeah, so that was Johnny Two Cello. He was way better than Mother's Basement, so that's good. This was a pretty good video. I it's too bad he didn't like it as much, but I mean, obviously it could have contained more polish. That would have definitely made it better. Visual polish, especially, because like visually it didn't look that good. Rick and Morty's best finale ever. Oh, is he a fellow Rick and Morty lover? That's good, because that was a really good finale, I remember. You know, I'm still making my Rick and Morty videos eventually. They are supposed to be a retrospect, so get ready to watch them eventually. But yeah, I mean, like, one of the main things about the anime, the Rick and Morty anime, is that it would be faster than the main Rick and Morty. It would come out faster. It wouldn't have as much polish, because the main Rick and Morty takes literally forever. It just takes so long because it is so well polished and so well done all the time. So it's good that we got the anime to tide us over from one season to another. And I can't wait for season 8, I guess, of Rick and Morty. Alright, subscribe for more anti-reviews, baby. Goodbye.